I've got the woe begone, down low Mifwump Blues. But grandfather's garden is the cure for the Mifwump Blues.
Hi everyone, it's Brie and I'm back to read more of David Loye's Grandfather's Garden with wonderful illustrations by A. Christopher Simon. I hope you enjoyed the Mifwump song that you got to listen to in our last episode. Today, we're going to be enjoying a story called The Mystery of the Dodo in the Tum Tum Bushes. And there is a wonderful photograph of a saber-toothed tiger with, I believe it's an auk. Here we go. And I hope you have your markers and your pencils and your crayons out so that you can share your drawings with us afterwards. Once upon a time, there was an auk named Dodo. And one day, this auk, who happened to live in Australia, but of course it didn't know that where it lived was called Australia. All it knew was that it was living in this wide, wide wilderness that got awfully hot sometimes and awfully cold at other times. Well, it was walking through the Tum Tum Bushes, for the Tum Tum Bushes grew very plentifully in this area of Australia, when it chanced upon a stream in which there was a creature. The auk paused and said, "What are you?" The creature, which was swimming in the stream, but then crawled up on the land, said, "I am a platypus. What are you?" The auk said, "I am an auk named Dodo." The platypus said, "You can't be an auk. Auks are extinct." The auk looked at the platypus and said, "Is that a duck bill that you are wearing?" And the platypus said, "Yes, it's the latest fashion. It was given to me by evolution." And the auk said, "If you are truly a duck-billed platypus, you are extinct." This gave them both considerable reason for thought. The platypus looked down into the stream and saw its reflection and thought to itself, "I can't be extinct because I can see myself there in the water." The mystery deepens. The auk sort of shook itself and preened its feathers with its bill and thought to itself, "I'm very much here and alive. I can't be extinct." To make sure, it did a little tap dance that raised up the dust a bit while it flapped its stubby wings. Sure enough, there in the dust were these footprints made by tap dancing auk feet. "If I'm extinct, how did I make those tap dancing footprints?" it asked the platypus. "And if I'm extinct, why can I see my reflection there in the stream? And yours too," said the platypus. They both granted that it was too much of a mystery to try and solve on such a hot day before lunchtime and then nap time. So the auk continued on his way through the Tum Tum Bushes, and all of a sudden he came upon a great saber-toothed tiger. Now fortunately, the saber-toothed tiger had already eaten, but the auk didn't know this. The saber-toothed tiger looked at the auk and said, "What are you?" The auk began to tremble and sweat ran down its face. "I'm only a harmless auk named Dodo," it said. And the saber-toothed tiger said, "Get off it. You needn't be afraid. I've just had my dinner. I'm not going to eat you." He said, "What'd you say your name was again?" And the auk said, "I'm just an auk named Dodo." "Auk," said the saber-toothed tiger. "Auks is extinct." Before he had time to think through what he was saying, Dodo the auk made the mistake of saying, "Well, it was my understanding that saber-toothed tigers are extinct." And then he made it even worse by saying, "And by the way, it's incorrect to say auks is extinct. You should have said auks are extinct." And then he realized he'd said the wrong thing, for the tiger's brow furrowed. And then it wiped its face with one big paw. And the auk stood there paralyzed, realizing that he'd angered the tiger and that probably the tiger was considering whether it might not be nice to have a little dessert of auk a la mode. Saved by the bee. At that moment, a bee came buzzing by and started buzzing around the saber-toothed tiger's head, distracting it. It kept crinkling its nose and waving at the bee with a paw that broke its line of thought, and it forgot all about considering the auk for dessert. The auk felt that this was a good moment to sort of slip away, and so he did. And so he walked and he walked. The truth be that he waddled. It wasn't much of a walk. It was truly a waddle. He was a really gawky, ungainly bird with every reason to be extinct. And so he waddled and he waddled through the Tum Tum Bushes, and he came to the strangest creature. And he asked this creature, who was an awfully shy, round sort of bird with a sort of silly curved bill and nervous, stupid look on its face, he asked what it was. And the creature looked awfully embarrassed and sort of crinkled its face, and the auk could see it was thinking. Finally, the other bird said, "I'll think of it in a minute now. Who and what are you?" And the auk thought, "Oh, this must be the world's dumbest creature. It doesn't even know what it is." But the auk was very polite, and so it said, "Well, I'm an auk." The other one thought and thought and thought and crinkled up its face and scrunched its funny curved bill around and sniffed a few times and scratched its foot in the sand and then looked up at the sky and said, "That's interesting." And then it looked puzzled and said, "I'm sorry, I just forgot. What did you say?" The auk was a little put out. "I'm an auk," it said. An auk, A-U-K, auk, auk. The other bird crinkled its face and said, "That's very interesting. And what did you say your name was?" "Dodo and Dodo Incorporated." The auk said, it meant by now it was getting a little exasperated. This was not a conversation it was enjoying. It said, "I'm an auk named Dodo. Dodo. D-O-D-O. Dodo." Now the auk could see that what it had said had lodged in some cavern within the other bird's diminished intellect. But still there was something going on upstairs. One could almost hear the clanking of the gears, and the other thing sort of began to breathe a little heavily with the effort of thought. Finally, its eyes sort of bolted, and it looked very startled and astonished, and it said, "What did you say?" And the auk said, "Dodo! Dodo, my name is Dodo." And the other creature said, "That's me, I'm the Dodo, I'm a Dodo, I remembered." And the auk said, "That can't be, for dodos are extinct." The other thing that thought it was the Dodo had to think about this, and it crinkled up its face and scrunched around and walked a bit and whistled a little. Then it sat down on a rock, just looking so mournful. It said, "I knew there was something wrong with me, I just knew it." It just sat there for the longest time. The auk was about to go on, but the Dodo said, "Wait!" It looked up, very sad, and wiped a tear from its eye. "It's probably true that I'm extinct. I'm pretty dumb, I realize, but I'm not so dumb that I don't know that auks are extinct." And the auk said, "You're the third person that's told me this, so it must be true." And he sat down on a rock next to the Dodo. Here were these two poor extinct birds in this area of the Tum Tum Bushes in Australia, in which everything else seemed to be extinct. The duck-billed platypus, the saber-toothed tiger. In fact, it was doubtful that the saber-toothed tiger had ever even lived in Australia. Maybe this wasn't even Australia. It was all very, very confusing. And they sat there, the auk and the Dodo, and gradually they found that being extinct together was a bonding experience. The Dodo put his wing around the shoulder of the auk. The auk wept a bit and put his wing around the shoulder of the Dodo. Then they rose, looked out beyond the Tum Tum Bushes into the vast wasteland, and they got up, their wings around each other's shoulders, and the Dodo said to the auk, "Loye, this looks like the beginning of a beautiful friendship." It was like something in a movie. In fact, it was in a movie. For that is what Humphrey Bogart said to Claude Rains in the movie Casablanca as they walked off into the desert together, leaving the airport. But that is another story altogether. The moral for this story: nothing is really gone from us as long as someone, somewhere, still hangs on to it in their mind. So thanks for joining me for our story time today, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.
I've got the woe begone, down low Mifwump Blues. But grandfather father's garden is the cure for the Mifwump Blues.